Welcome back to Cut and welcome back to another industry interview.
For today's interview, we have Sasha Grossman, the makeup artist for Smile 2.
Sasha has worked as a makeup artist and department head for TV shows and movies alike, such as Good Girls, both of the Smile movies, and most recently, Companion.
Little know about that, we'll actually also have Sasha in an interview for her role in Companion, so this will be the very first time that we interview someone for two different movies, so we're quite excited about that. Before we go on to the interview, make sure to like and subscribe so you can get more interviews like this for people that work on your favorite movies.
And without further ado, here is Sasha Grossman.
My name is Sasha Grossman, and I'm a makeup artist working in New York and LA mostly. And I guess I have an interesting sort of way in that I started in the industry because I grew up very traditionally in LA. I had my whole family worked in television. And so it's a little funny. Like my parents were producers. My brother is a screenwriter living in LA. My other brother was doing art department for a while. So we sort of grew up around storytelling. My parents, that was like always super important to them and to kind of instill in us like a love for storytelling. So growing up, I actually lived next to a silent movie theater. So my parents would always take me in my like pajamas as a little kid to go see like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin movies. And that really cemented like my love for everything in like that world. Um, and the different ways to convey story because like at the time, you'd go and watch the movie and there was a live piano accompaniment. And that was something that it's like, there's just so many ways to be immersed in creating a film. And I just thought that was just such a cool thing to grow up with. But because I loved creating characters and storytelling in that way, I initially went into the creative writing route and I went to college at Emerson in Boston for creative writing. Specifically, I made a major of like poetry, which I always said I majored in feelings. And it was a very funny one to kind of focus in because they had a really good kind of writing literature and publishing program. So I sort of made this like eked out this specific way of writing that I really wanted to explore more. And as I was there, so many of my friends were making short films and like loved movies just as much as me. So I always loved makeup. I never really thought of it as a job. And then it was when I started talking about character making and building, I realized that was like the physical manifestation of it. So what I loved about writing, I suddenly could do in physical form as well. And so I started doing all my friends' movies. There was a lot of learning because they'd be like, we're going to do a zombie movie. I'm like, okay, I have to figure out how to do that. So it was about asking a lot of questions, doing a lot of trial and error. And I just sort of, what I loved about it is I still was doing my poetry and my writing, but that was so solitary. And then suddenly you get on a film set and everything is like electric and exciting. And I was like, this is how I want to do characters. Um, so I sort of, as soon as I graduated, I moved to New York and I kind of met a lot of NYU students here and got involved in the undergrad and graduate program and to kind of make up for them. And the cool thing about that has been growing together. Like even to this day, one of my best friends, Sienna, is an AD that I did a movie with this past year even, and she and I met on a student film like maybe 12 years ago.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
It's cool. It's just like you never know. And like getting to see people in all the phases, and you never know who you're going to meet in the industry. So for me, it was just about saying yes to everything. And like if a script was fun, I wanted to do it. And I kind of figured it out from there. And it's like getting to see all these filmmakers kind of grow up and you all sort of, you still cross paths to this day.
Oh, wow, that's great. So would you say that you like self-taught a lot of the skill that you have now?
Yeah, so I had a kind of weird journey with it since I never went to makeup school. There was one theater class at the time offered at Emerson, and I remember just like turning myself into a clown and a raccoon, and like that was that was like kind of what we learned. But a lot of it was trial and error and talking to different artists and kind of doing research and playing. I mean, all my friends in college were very patient with me and would sit for me, and I could just practice everything on them. I did get to do something kind of cool for my for my final project, one part of it for poetry was making like a collection of poems, but I was a photo minor. So for my final project, I love Cindy Sherman, this amazing visual artist, and like she would always turn herself into different characters. So I sort of did a homage to her, where I, for my photo project, did makeup looks on myself to transform into all these different characters. And so that was sort of like a way to, like, I haven't mastered bruising yet. Like, I'm going to try to do something with that, or I want to do this really crazy glam look and create a portfolio of those that I liked to challenge myself in that way and to pick different characters and different kind of themes to play with.
Hmm. So you're originally from LA.
Yeah.
Why is it that you picked New York?
I love LA and it seems like kind of the traditional option. And I work there as well now still. And my family all lives there still, so I go back fairly often. But I mean, there's nothing like New York. The East Coast, like I think that I wanted to experience it. And having gone to college in Boston, I was like, let me try like the New York step and just see like what I can figure out there because New York felt like this crazy beast while I was living in LA that I'm like, I can't possibly handle that. But having the kind of in between and going to school on the East Coast, I was like, why not? I'm already here. And the LA is always there, and I just never left.
That is so very interesting.
Yeah.
Like we love Boston with all of our heart, and we
Mhm.
have very mixed feelings about New York. Uh, because again, it's so busy and it just feels like you never sleep.
Yeah.
Like it's just
Mhm.
always going, going and going. And actually we have it in our plans to move to LA to
Yeah.
filmmaking. And it feels like you said, like a beast, like
Mhm.
that. Let's see what happens with that.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting seeing someone that did that kind of path.
Well, it's terrifying. It's definitely a leap, but it's so worth it. Like I love it in New York so much. But I think you'll love LA too. It's classic. It's classic filmmaking territory. It has like, the history in its bones.
Mhm. I guess we can just hop right into Smile. That
Yeah.
is the main goal is to hear your work on it. I know that you worked on both the movies, and Smile 1 did follow a very private person, a psychiatrist, while Smile 2 is this world-known singer with lots of glamorous makeup and whatnot. So, in what ways did you approach the movies differently?
So it's so fun because like Smile was the sort of thing that while we were making it, we knew it was something special. And Parker Finn, our director, is so phenomenal to work with. He has such a vision and he's so collaborative. So the first Smile sort of we knew we were all having the best time ever making it, but then it exploded, right? And so it was fun going from something that felt like private and this like more insular story to suddenly literally on a big stage. And I get the thing for me is to make it exciting for myself. And I would always talk to Parker about these little like weird ideas that I had for makeup to like sneak in themes and sneak in things that meant something to me. And he was always so excited about it as well. So something that I pulled from the first movie that I crossed over into the second was for me this this kind of moment of and the importance of reflection in the makeup. And so even in the first movie, Rose, when we first meet her, her makeup is more matte. There's like no shimmer, it's matte colors, it's more like one dimensional. But as soon as the entity starts haunting her, is when I would switch her makeup into anything had like a sheen to it. Like there were more metallics, there were like small shimmers, there were these moments of reflection that I thought, to me in both movies, it made sense that these women, while being haunted, would try to almost distract literally the people in their lives, or in Sky's case, like the public, from what was going on. And I thought a subtle way to do that would be instead of mattes, which are absorbing, reflection would just push back. And so I knew that mirrors were a big thing in the second movie as well, even talking with Parker and Lester, the production designer. And so little ways that I was like, oh, this is going to be fun for me because it's almost like you're creating a distraction. Like, look over here. Like, I'm not going crazy. Like, don't worry, like this is going to push back the focus. And so I wanted to subtly and in kind of interesting ways try to do that wherever I could with the makeup.
It's all very interesting because we were also talking with Alexis, the costume designer,
Mhm.
and,
Nice.
and it was definitely like the director had a clear view of what needed to happen to project that reflectiveness of everything, which
Mhm.
I think made it in some sense more enclosed. Like I always think back at um the scene on with the mirrors and all the dancers.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
there's so many reflections of them, and there are already so many, and it just feels so enclosed, and that you feel so trapped, and
Mhm.
with the makeup and like it running down her face with shimmer.
Mhm.
It just all feels so unique.
Yeah.
Like I never really seen anything like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think a scene specifically that I knew I had on my mood board since like the beginning, since I read the script. I knew the car accident scene. I
Mhm.
wanted to do makeup that looked like a million shattered mirrors, and like I wanted it to mimic the look and feel of a car accident. So her makeup in that scene was almost like a smashed metal and smashed glass and smashed mirrors, because I thought depending on how they wanted to shoot it, I wanted them to be able to play with light reflection off her makeup. And because I knew she'd be crying and I knew it would be so focused on her face. So I thought it would be sort of this interesting moment of almost giving a little taste of what was to come with showing that broken glass makeup. And there's a the little Easter egg that I was very excited about, which I don't even know, I don't think you even get to see it that close in the movie, but in the finale, the backup dancers all have her same makeup from the car accident scene, like the same type of shattered glass makeup as they're kind of as
Wow.
Oh,
she's.
I gotta rewatch that. That was cool.
I know. I think they end up being a little deep in the background, but like I know it's there. And so
Mhm.
that to me is like my key Valerie Carney, we worked together on a lot and we would just geek out over all these things that we were gonna do together and little things that we'd place in. Cause even she did Gemma, the character,
Mhm.
and we snuck a smile onto her nail that I don't know, like when she was lying in the bed, you might see a little bit of like a hidden smile to show like she's not herself, you know?
And even if you don't get to see those details up close, it just speaks to the intentionality and how
Mhm.
much love it was put into this film that just broadens up everything. Like the most basic makeup just now becomes so special and so important to the
Mhm.
storytelling.
Absolutely. It's just fun. It's fun little gifts that we leave ourselves for later too.
Mhm.
I gotta say, like when you kind of saw like flashbacks or moments of Sky like pre-accident, she looks like an entirely different person. And it's not just her long black hair, which she obviously
Mhm.
doesn't have, but there's just I don't know, the way that she looks is just so different. Like how I know you talked about the car accident, but how did you go about creating basically a whole new version of her like after the accident as well? She looks completely different.
Thank you. Yeah, that was fun. That was such a collaboration between Alexis, the costume designer, and Angie Johnson, the hair department head, who's like one of my best friends too. And working together is always a blast. So Naomi is also so collaborative. Like we would have input from her all the time and getting to play and like what she might have thought and like what her thoughts for Sky and we all would just kind of have these amazing discussions every day about what we wanted to do. And we knew for a pre-car accident, she's kind of a woman on the brink, right? Like the only time we ever really see her are never her strongest moments. So there are moments that we see her in the past where she just looks defeated. And it was about like taking away more of the color from her skin. She's been exhausted. She's not well. She's, doing drugs, she's partying, she's like fighting with her boyfriend. So it was a kind of like a removal of brightness in the past, even though there was makeup, it would more sit on top of her skin.
Mm.
And then when you see her again, when she's like kind of healing, there really is this moment where you think like she made it. She made it out of the darkness and maybe she's going to be okay. And then it all gets kind of ripped apart again. But like little ways that we would play with just kind of making her more lackluster in the past, but it's still she's so done up because that's her role, like as a person in the public, as a pop star, and all that expectation and the weight on her soul on her shoulders.
Wow. Yeah. Jumping off of that as well, there's that moment in the freezer in which Sky is fighting herself, aka the demon version of her in the car accident. And I don't know if you immediately picked up on it, but I could just tell from like the acting and like her face that she just didn't look human uh
Mhm.
as well. Like she just also looked very off. Like it was, I feel like I could see that in that moment that that was like a inhuman version of that. So is that something that you tried to do intentionally? Like, well, how'd you go about that demon
Yeah,
version?
I mean, the beauty of Naomi is she goes there. Like we shot that very, very late in the game. The part where she is battling herself. We had shot the scene of her in the car accident um like much, much earlier. And so that was maybe one of our toughest days because it was so heartbreaking. Because the way that they, even the set, it was a car that, like a physical car that was up in it, so it would really mimic the tree. And so to get in for touch-ups, you'd like climb up a ladder and like meet her in there. And she was strapped in like so that she could be kind of hanging off of it. And it was me and Angie and then Jeremy Sellenfriend, who's our special effects department head. You know, we'd all be coming in there and he'd just like spray her with blood and she would just start sobbing and it would just be so visceral that it really, she is able to contort her face, like the things that she is able to do. The crying, I know we had a lot of jokes about just the enormous amount of snot in that movie, or it
Yeah.
was never ending. But she was able to like reach in and feel this so deeply that when we got to go back and shoot her literally confronting herself and watching the way that she played off of herself, the things that she did with her face were so upsetting and heartbreaking and beautiful. And that's her. I mean, obviously, there's moments where it's clearly like they go in and they do these crazy effects with it, but like for the most part, like that anguish is her. Um, and it was truly one of those moments where you feel lucky to be there because the way that they shot that too, like when Naomi is on the table and she looks up, by the way, the blood dripping on her face, that was me on a ladder, dripping blood splatter. And I was so nervous. I was like, is it landing in the right place? Like it's the most intimidating job ever to try to do that. And you know, Naomi's like, you've got this.
So you're almost
So
like an extra in the
Yeah.
scene.
I was just like, oh God, so much responsibility. But when she looks up and sees herself in the ceiling, they actually had her in the ceiling. Like they built a rig into the ceiling of the car seat. And so she'd be in a harness and they would crank it up and she'd be lifted into it and be
Oh.
fully like upside down. So she was truly experiencing the physicality of being in that place as well as like acting in it. And then, you know, obviously we have our amazing stunt performers. So when they drop down, it's like she's protected from that. But it was really her like upside down in a chair in the ceiling.
I mean, it really feels like with her willingness and just her ability to do all of this, it almost made your job a little easier. Eh,
Yes.
what is like one of the toughest jobs you've had? I know you've done a lot. So just to quickly stray off a smile for one quick second, I want to kind of know.
God. Toughest. That's hard. Oh man, toughest jobs. Because I would say like Smile was one. I'll tell you a story from Smile and then I'll think about another film too.
Oh.
But something that was because there was so much crying in Smile and because the makeup was so elaborate, like I really wanted this ability to sort of let the makeup do its thing and let Naomi do her thing and not have to interrupt and like run in and be like, hold on, let me just reset this because it got messy. I kind of had to create this plan for it where I could be hands off and let it just work with her and the continuity would match and everything would sort of gel. And I knew in a lot of scenes with her crying, we'd get into kind of a makeup messiness situation. But early on, I noticed that she had this crazy ability to cry the same tear every single time. out of like the same exact spot, and it's I've never seen anything like it. We had this joke about it because there's one of my favorite old Hollywood stories is that um John Barrymore was being directed by this director Garson Kanin, and he like got him to do this really emotional scene, and at the end of it he cries these little tears and this one big fat tear, and at the end of it Garson's like, we've got it, we don't have to ever do it, like we've got the take. And John was like, well, do you want like the big tear first next time? And he's like, sure, John. Like, sure. He's like, let's just try it. And they do the scene again, and he does it. And he does the big tear first and then the little tears, and like completely gives him the other play of it. So Naomi and I called her Tear Barry because we're like, Barry's done it again. He's fantastic.
Reminds
Um,
me of that one shot in Babylon.
Yeah. Mhm.
but- well, that's what I think. I actually think that's based on that story because Babylon is all the stories from old Hollywood, right? And this story about John Barrymore is from a book called Hollywood by Garson Kanin. That's all of his stories of working with actors. So I'm like, someone must have read it. Like, I feel like anyone who loves Hollywood stories, I'm like, they must have got that and like been like, Margot, let's shoot this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, that seems like it has to be from that story. Someone loves this book. Um, but so in the scenes where she had to cry, I realized I had to come up with this way to keep my makeup as consistent as her tears. So I started using waterproof mascara everywhere, but then planting just one tiny section of regular mascara, kind of like doubled it up just in this one spot where I knew she would cry. So every time she did, the tear would hit it and drag it down. So it was like this perfect consistency every time. And it felt like, yes. Um, because we did the same thing for the finale too, when she's up on the stage and it's like Parker knew that he wanted it to be this like beautiful glittery mess. And I was like, okay, I think we can make this happen to have it run down in this like beautiful disaster, but it's going to be easy to reset. It's going to not take her out of the performance. It's not going to, I don't have to run up on stage in front of the Megatron every time and like make sure it's fine. Like I just know it's going to be consistent. So,
Um,
Gosh. Must be so helpful to have that
yeah.
because not being able to control your tears obviously has a whole host of other challenges.
Yeah, and I mean you mentioned not taking them out of the scene because I imagine having to do a reset every other show, every other scene, it's gotta take the actor out. So
Especially in scenes where she has to be belligerent and crying and
yeah.
hyperventilating. Like that's so much.
the last thing you need is me being like, excuse me.
So, talking about another character that we were really impacted by was that crazy male fan that then goes and breaks into our house. I feel like I could almost smell him. That's
Mhm.
how disturbing and disgusting he looked. Can you just tell us about that?
Yeah, so I have to give so much credit. That's all my friend Jeremy, Ellen Friend, our special effects department head. He is phenomenal because in the script, that character was listed as I think bad skin guy,
Mm.
and he went off the deep end with it. Like it was horrifying and disgusting. And the actor was so phenomenal. He was such a sport. He would sit in the chair forever and just like get all of these like horrible skin ailments on, and he'd be like really into it and like play with it. And Jeremy just really, his effects work is so beautiful. Like I'm always impressed with him, and he and I've done, this is our fourth movie together, and it's just fun to share a trailer with like not only a friend but someone that you really look up to their design, and we're always like showing each other stuff and talking through things because oftentimes our work will intersect at a certain point, you know, like I would do Naomi's beauty and then he would come in and add the blood, and we talk through like her scars were a really big thing and work together. And so getting to see him do this and make that guy so creepy,
Mhm.
I loved it. It was such a fun day on set too, because we see him the first time he was on set was at this autograph signing. And we were like, oh, this is terrible. Like it looks so bad. And then when he was, more exposed in the later scene, Jeremy had even more space to work with.
Mhm.
And just like the little things that you get to, it's like when you see your friends do such beautiful work and make it so horrifying is like I love it. That's the because we also did the first smile together.
And he was so realistic too. It almost felt like, is nobody else seeing this guy? Like, do you think
Yeah,
he's normal?
Right.
I know. Like everything about that scene, it's just like leading up to it, like the clothes scattered on the floor, and then you're just like, I know what's about to happen.
Alexis was also telling us about the little girl and how it was pretty much just her. Like, she did the job, but
Yes.
you work with her as well?
Yes, yes. So with Alexis and or the
Oh,
little
with the little girl.
yeah, so she was able to be so creepy. She was the sweetest kid in real life, like just very precocious, very much like nice to meet you guys. And then she got on screen and we were like, oh God. Like she was there. I think her dad was with her and she would just like sit in her little act like in her little tall chair and just be like, how's everyone doing? And then she'd get on screen. We're like, oh, it's so scary.
That's crazy.
I
It's
love
fun because Parker has such a vision for everyone's smile, and it is always incredible to see the different ways the actors choose their smile and like how each of them make it, they bring their own to it. Like, I mean, Lucas has like the perfect scary smile. Like Lucas Gage, he's just got teeth for days. So like seeing him, it's just, oh, and obviously Ray. I mean, we had the joke that he's like, I smiling is in the family. So
it.
he definitely was channeling his the shine like the shining smile was
Oh
we're
yeah.
just like oh my god.
So kind of going into the finale, we had I guess semi-similar finales with both of them with like this final four monster. I know you particularly didn't necessarily work on that, but I did watch an interview from the first Smile talking about how it's pretty much all practical effects. Um,
Yeah.
so and I know you said you were there to kind of see it all unfold. If you want to give us some insight on what it was like in Smile 2, kind of doing that whole scene.
Yeah, I mean, something that I love about these movies and Parker in particular as a director is he really wants to do as much as possible in camera, which I love because in my mind, it's like what you can physically make and portray is always going to be so much scarier than what digitally you can do, or even it just there's such an art and such a beauty to like the build and seeing this thing in person. And so the monster, which was Alec Gillis, who's incredible, it was this huge interactive like puppet, and there were people inside of it. And there were people kind of operating it from the sides. Like Jeremy was the special effects department head, was one of the guys like in a green suit with his team like on the side, like moving the hands as they come out of the body. So like everybody had their little piece, and in ways that I didn't even expect at the time. I remember early on, I was like, okay, so how much of this is transforming from Sky? Like, what are we incorporating from her into the monster? And as we started seeing the storyboards, I was like, okay, we're like, it's coming out of her. Like, so we had to do that. Like, Alec made these hands, and it was then about making the hands match Naomi. So she had all these fake tattoos that we would draw on. So, in the trailer, Valerie and I would be like drawing the tattoos on these like puppet hands and like painting the nails, like giving a manicure to this beast. And then the best thing is I remember, we'd be shooting long hours, and there was one day that I just get back to the trailer and I knew that it was happening. They were gonna put the puppet head of Naomi in the trailer so that I could add the makeup to it for her finale look. Because there were going to be moments when we'd see that head while she was looking at herself
Mhm.
on the puppet before the monster comes out of her. And so I was like, okay, it has to have this really specific makeup. So I came back to the trailer and the head was just like sitting there waiting for me. And it was like, ugh. So I remember like painting the face and doing like the glitter and all this stuff. And I was so fried. I just, in without remembering, I was like, hey, can you look up? And it's like, it's not real. It's not up. Like, I just talked to it like I would Naomi. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is not, I was like, I gotta go home. I just talked to a puppet head. And like, after a while, I just like couldn't be in the trailer with it anymore. I'm like, it's done. Please take it back.
Because it's so realistic.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, yeah. And then, we love to flip things upside down. I know that was like a big scare in the first one. So when she gets like split in half in the second and it just swings down, I was like, that's the makeup on the
Oh
dummy.
yeah.
But so seeing like, you'd come to set and it was just kind of electric in the air on those days when you'd have the big puppets, because it really was this moment for every single department to shine. And you
Mhm.
had the puppet was like all in different pieces, and there were people walking around who were like half in a puppet, like, and just so that it would all come together. And just remember looking at it and being like, it has so many teeth, Parker, like has so many teeth in it. And he's like, I know.
I love that.
How many people were you overseeing during the production?
So on like a day-to-day basis, and this is sort of what's funny, is like it was me and my friend Valerie who was my key. And it was mostly the two of us because I would do Naomi and she would be doing like any other character kind of coming in for the day, like who would be in scenes with her. And then we would have obviously our amazing additional artists who would come in for like the bigger scenes and the crowd stuff because all of it is so important. Like we had amazing team come in when we were doing the backup dancers because they all had to have these really kind of important looks as well. Like when, obviously when they're just doing the rehearsals, they're more kind of neutral looks, but then we wanted to plan these really fun designs for whenever they were in their stage makeup and their costumes. So I think another favorite day of mine, we had the rehearsal where she's wearing the red shiny outfit, and she thinks she breaks her leg,
Mhm.
and she sees Ray as one of the dancers, like in a fantasy moment. And all of the dancers, I remember being in the trailer and talk because Valerie and we always talk through, and I'm like, do you think it would be crazy if I put a tiny jewel on all of the dancers where Naomi's mole is? So it's almost like they're like single white femaling her. Like there's just this moment where it's unsettling and they all are matching her and they all have this creepy little thing where they're like looking like her, but in like a performance way. And we got so excited about it. And I told Alexis, and I was like, Alexis, the jewel is going to be red because of the red outfit that she's wearing. And she's like, Nyla. And so we all sort of geeked out together about like ways to make everything cohesive and like a little bit unsettling. And I was like, I think it's unsettling if they're like, we're copying your beauty mark. Like, who does that? Like, and it's a jewel and it's this creepy red, like foreshadowing of everything. So it was just little things like that. So we'd always have amazing artists come in and help. Like once the design was kind of decided, they would come in and everyone would do the background dancers to make it consistent. So it was a smaller team than you would kind of expect because then, Jeremy, our effects artist, had all of his people for the like crazy kill days, and Alec had his people for the puppets, and so it depended on what you were shooting, but there are days when it could have just been like two of us and days that it was like 20 of us. So it varied depending on what we were doing.
Good thing I'm mentioning kills because there was some pretty fantastic kills.
Yeah.
One of our favorite kills, I think, was with the mom in the hospital and just the amount of blood in that scene. We were talking with Alexis about all the different ways that she had to, figure out how to get like the blood and all those different effects. But how did you guys in the makeup department handle all that
Yeah,
blood?
that was really fun and a big challenge for me because we shot the scene when she like pulls into the Pizza Hut, like then the freezer scene. We shot that before. So we knew where she was gonna end up with like the amount of blood still left on her and the bruising and everything. So to shoot that before and then go do this scene where we knew she was going to get absolutely drenched was like, okay, let's figure out the best way to sort of plan this because it required so much effort and so many talks with all different departments, which is like my favorite thing is like when everyone sort of comes together, like Alexis with the costumes and like with Jeremy with his crazy effects on the mom and like everything that we had to do with Naomi. And so we had this moment where Parker on this movie was very into we would do these long takes of things like even the opener of the movie it's like pretty much a one-er, and this scene was similar to that. And once the mom had stopped stabbing herself, like we had Naomi like struggling to pull everything out of her arm, and like kind of get out of the bed and start running. And we did it all in camera, like as much as we could. So how we did that is she like jumps out of the bed, runs to the door, and the door has a cutout in it. And so she puts her hands in this bucket of blood so that when the camera pans down, you see her covered in blood. And that was all because she was being sprayed like in camera just below the camera line. Um, and what I had done for myself, knowing that like she was going to wipe her face off with the kind of the blankets or the sheets on the bed, I painted on her face originally with this thing we call Illustrator palette, which is sort of like watercolor for makeup. It's an alcohol-based paint, like or an alcohol activated, so it won't come off with water or anything. It can just be removed with more of the alcohol. So I painted where I knew the blood would, where I wanted it to be left for to match the scene after. So I kind of did a base paint of that and then put water-based blood at the last minute on top of it so that when she would wipe her face, the water-based blood would immediately come off and leave the underpainting left. So then in camera, it would match where we knew it needed to end up.
Mhm.
Oh, wow.
So it's
Wow.
sort of like you couldn't like when you shoot out of order like that, you're like, we can't leave it up to chance. We have to have a plan. But that day was also just so fun. And Rosemary was such a trooper of getting just absolutely annihilated and covered in blood and like lying on the floor. Like she is so funny. And she's just like walking around with like one eye, just like, hi.
Yeah, that scene was absolutely terrifying. I remember being in the theater being like, "Mm."
Yeah, when she just like throws the blanket over her, we're like, bye.
So overall, it seems like this is such like an amazing set to be on, but would you say you had one particular thing that was the most memorable for you?
So I would say like one of my most memorable in terms of artistry is the finale because I really got to plan such a fun look where I talked with Charlie, our DP, and Lester, the production designer, about like what they were all thinking for the set for that and also the lighting. And I knew that when I talked to them, it meant that I could use glow in the dark or UV activated makeup because when she steps out of the pod, the type of lights they were going to use would make everything glow. And so that's when I got very excited. So I would use these glitters that were UV and this eyeshadow, the like neon yellow eyeshadow that was UV activated. So it really made everything just like pop in a way that, I mean, so many times you never get to do looks like that on screen. And something that felt just so kind of part of a team effort on all across the board in all ways. And like Alexis showed me the designs for the costume early on. So I knew what colors and like what shapes I kind of wanted to mimic. And then we all saw it together for the first time, like everything fully the completed look. And it was just like, this is exciting. Like this is all so exciting. But then I think if I'm being honest too, like one of the like most memorable days is the scene where she's in her apartment and all of her backup dancers chase after her and it ends with one of them putting their hand in her throat like
Yes.
that. So we always knew that would be a really crazy day and a lot to kind of figure out and there were talks about like is someone's hand going to go in her mouth like just the beginning of it like how are we going to do that and it became clear like okay it's going to be VFX work but what is going to make it so that the shape like the way her mouth has to look and the shape of everything like what is going to have to happen to make it so that they can make that happen in post and it was decided that the thing that made the most sense was a pear on like a stick right the pear in her mouth would end up looking like the hand going in and that would be able to be cut into that so there was a moment where Parker was like all right so Naomi who who are you like comfortable with that you would like be fine with them just like putting the pear in your mouth and she's like Sasha I was like what like, oh no. And she does this Naomi's really good at an impression of me. And she's like, you're just like, oh no.
Now I gotta
And
put
so
a hair in it
and
without
so like
her.
Great.
yeah, so like from across the room, I was like, what am I doing? And so I had to like work with the visual effects team and the choreographer and the dancers because then what ended up happening in that scene is I was standing pretty much right next to camera while at the end of it, all the dancers are surrounding her and they're sort of moving as one. And then it's just me with a pair being like, "Ugh." Like I don't know how to dance, I don't know how to move, like all of these people. And I'm just like, okay. And then when Parker would say, go, I would have to like kind of jump up and spear it right perfectly into her mouth. And I mean, of course, the first time I like didn't do the right angle, and Parker's like, excuse, so like we need to get this. And I was like, I'm sorry. And I think there's this picture that my friend Rachel, who was Naomi's like set costumer, she has a picture of me where I have never looked so serious in my life. Like I this was the most important job I've ever done. And it's just me so scared holding a pear like on a stick in a sea of dancers with the camera next to me and I'm like miss it. And so seeing that in theaters I was like guys that creepy hand was my hand holding a pear
I mean,
once,
could you share that
once
photo?
upon a time.
Could you share that photo with us?
Oh yeah, I can send it to you of me like holding the pear.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
okay.
yeah,
love that.
yeah. That
It's
is so crazy because I mean, when you're making film, you have to figure out how to do stuff, and sometimes it's not what you would think.
Especially not a pair. Like,
it did the shape perfectly. It was like exactly what the visual effects team needed to like then do what they needed to do. Because then they did, you know, the hand obviously was like a mix of uh special effects and all this stuff, but it was not shot at the same time. So it's like they needed something that would work, and they're like, a pair.
I mean, that scene is also really impactful and scary, but when you saw it on theaters, were you able to be scared thinking about what had to be done before that?
I was because the way that like me knowing it, it's because I have a friend that gets really scared of stuff. So we were seeing it together and I was like, that don't worry, that's the scene with me with the pair. Like, don't be scared. So like to her, I could tell her to like not worry so much. But for me, it still is scary because like in the moment you're shooting all these components, but you don't see how it's all gonna cut together. And just the sheer terror that Naomi brings and the amazing choreography of the dancers and the idea. I mean, it's so brilliant to me that she's a pop star. And then you have, of course, she's going to be haunted by visions of her backup dancers. Like, it's beautiful and terrifying. And the way they were all able to move, it was so cool. Like, any day that we had them on set was so much fun because they would literally just like always be dancing and stretching. And then they'd suddenly do these like creepy, creepy movements. And they could move as a unit too, which was really phenomenal to see. So, yeah, that scene is really scary.
so we are beginning to wrap up, but before we do that, as you know, our podcast, we are also filmmakers and we want to be able to give people who want to go into all different parts of the industry some advice and some insight into different careers that they could have. So what message would you give to someone that wants to go into the makeup department?
I mean, I would say I feel so lucky every day to do this job. Like I love my job so much. The people you get to meet, the art you get to create, the problem solving in itself is just fun too. But I think my advice is, you know, for me, it was about finding your people. And if you have that passion, like there's so many avenues into it, you know, because I did a lot of stuff for free. I had a lot of friends like let me practice on them. I did, you know, reaching out to Emerson and NYU was a big thing for me because there's always a need for our work. And so like getting to work with students and even like undergrad, graduate, everything, you never know who you're gonna connect with and who you're gonna then like work with again in the future. And so I definitely recommend kind of taking every opportunity. You know, I did the thing too where I worked at a makeup store for like in college and learned as much as I could and played with products and kind of got to know and became more familiar with kind of how certain things looked and how the difference between how things would look on camera versus in real life. And I think what I always like to say too is like pay it forward. And I hope to like really instill that in other artists because I had that done for me. People were so willing to share their knowledge. They were so friendly. And I always try to do that as well. Like I don't believe in gatekeeping. I don't believe in like secrets and like not sharing your information and your knowledge and your connections because it's like if you're lucky enough to get to make art for a living, like if you meet someone else who's interested in it, share the knowledge, like share the wealth because it's really important. So I think, you know, the best advice I could have is be passionate and be vocal about how passionate you are because you will find those people that you'll connect with and you will find those people that will kind of take you in and be like, well, let's go like talk about this or let's try to problem solve this thing. Like let's learn how to do this makeup or, you know, with and it can be across the board for any type of job in our industry. I just think if the passion is there, the work will be there and the people that you're meant to meet, you'll find each other.
Beforehand, before we fully wrap up, and just want to fanboy real quick. I love Good Girls, and I saw that you worked on Good Girls.
Oh yes. I
And
did the first two seasons. I loved working on that show so much. It was a blast. It was honestly like I've never laughed so much.
and it's such a simplistic concept of like this is just moms, but then it becomes so crazy.
Yeah. It really amps up very, very fast.
Yeah. Well, many people reach out to our podcast trying to figure out what to watch next and see what movies are good out there and whatnot. So, what is your favorite movie and why?
Okay, I have two. I Sunset Boulevard is my absolute favorite movie of all time. Like I'm a huge, again, because of where I grew up and how I grew up, like I love old Hollywood. Sunset Boulevard kind of ticks all the boxes for me. It's like this compelling, kind of creepy, beautiful story. It also is a nod to writing and filmmaking in general. Like I love any movie that's kind of low key also about the industry. I think
Yeah.
that's always fun. Norma Desmond is the most iconic character in the whole world, so I love her. I definitely recommend seeing Sunset Boulevard, but also Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. It's like the movie that I will never I will sit down and watch it if it's playing. I will never turn it off. Like I could watch it every day. If it came on every day, I would watch the whole thing every day because it's like a musical, it's comedy, it's like vibrant, vivacious. Like Marilyn Monroe is the genius in that. And so I think that I'm a big sucker for that. And it's actually based off of a book, which I highly recommend. A lot of people don't know. It's an amazing book by Anita Loos, and uh, it's told almost written as journal entries. It's like so self-deprecating of the Marilyn Monroe character.
Hmm.
I highly recommend it. It's one of the funniest, just in general, I think just pure comedy of the book and the movie kind of playing off each other.
And talking about books, I know you have your fangirl moment.
Okay, well, I was stalking your IMDb a little bit, and I noticed that you are scheduled to work on the People We Meet on Vacation movie.
Yeah.
So when that is done, obviously I know you can't say much on it now, but when that film is done, I'd love for you to come back and talk about it.
No, absolutely. I mean, we just finished. I got back from shooting it.
Ooh,
Yeah.
okay,
It
okay.
was honestly like a life-changing movie. I had the most incredible time shooting it.
Oh, I can't wait to see it. We will discuss.
Yes, absolutely.
So, where can people follow you? Where can people follow your work in general? Do you have a portfolio that we can see and
Yeah,
hear?
so my portfolio, it's like my IMDb is what I
Yeah.
usually use. But you can follow my Instagram. It's just Sasha Grossman. There's a lot of goofy content on there. Sometimes I try to post about work as well, but a lot of it is also just my random adventures with friends and but it is right now currently a lot of like behind the scenes stuff for Smile. So that's kind of if you wanted to check that out, like that's a good place to see stuff and to kind of hear the behind the scenes stories about some of the looks and like the meanings behind them. And so I've kind of put them up there for now.
And what is coming up next for you?
Right now, I'm open, kind of looking for the next thing.
That's fun.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Nice little break.
So at the end of our podcast, we always bid farewell by saying and cut and clapping it out. So we've been asking our guests if you could please just bid farewell to the episode, say goodbye to the audience, and then just do the clap and end cut.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you guys so much. It was so much fun to talk with you about movies and everything and to be a guest here on And Cut. And thanks for having me. And cut.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Cut. You can follow us on all social media, starting with Instagram as Cut the podcast. You can also follow us on YouTube as That Film Couple, which is the same handle for TikTok, That Film Couple for short form content. You can also follow us on Twitch as Sebasparra1K. And if you're watching right now on YouTube, you can find us on any podcast platform as Cut exclamation mark. Last but not least, you can follow me on Instagram as sebi.mp4.
And you can follow me at caitlin.mp4.
Thank you so much for being here one more week, and we'll see you in the next one.